Obi Eze watched his weeping wife pack her cheap, battered suitcase, and he felt absolutely nothing but relief. He was kicking her out of his luxury apartment tonight to save his multi-million-dollar tech firm, and he honestly didn't care if she had to sleep on the cold streets of Atlanta. He thought he had just outsmarted everyone. He thought he had finally cut the dead weight from his life. But Obi had no idea that the broken, sobbing woman he was throwing into the night was the only reason his empire existed at all. If Obi had just respected the vows he made when he was broke, his kingdom would have lasted forever. But greed always blinds the foolish. If you want to see exactly how an arrogant man loses his entire life in a single boardroom meeting, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because in these stories, the proud always crash to the dirt. And the humble? They always end up owning the building. He didn't feel an ounce of guilt as he watched her cry. In his twisted mind, his wife wasn't a partner anymore. She was an anchor weighing down a very expensive ship. "Please, Obi," Amaka whispered, her voice cracking as she folded a faded sweater into her bag. Her hands were shaking. "It's past midnight. Where am I supposed to go? I don't have any money. My name isn't on the bank accounts anymore. Just let me sleep on the couch tonight, please." Obi stood in the doorway of their massive master bedroom, leaning casually against the doorframe. He was 33 years old, wearing a silk robe and a luxury gold watch. He looked down at Amaka's worn-out jeans and her tired, makeup-free face. He felt a wave of profound disgust. And he couldn't believe he had ever been married to someone who looked so incredibly common. "That sounds like a personal problem, Amaka," Obi said, his voice smooth and cold. "I have the biggest meeting of my life tomorrow morning. Sterling Capital is buying my software company for $50 million. I cannot have you dragging down my energy. You cry too much. You complain too much. You simply don't fit into the lifestyle of a millionaire. I need you gone." Amaka looked up at him, her dark brown eyes swimming in tears. "I don't fit in? Obi, I built you. When you couldn't pay for your coding classes, I worked 3 double shifts at the diner. When you needed servers for your first launch, I sold my grandmother's necklace to pay for them. You told me we were building a life together." Obi actually laughed. It was a dark, a cruel sound that echoed in the massive, empty bedroom. "You were an early investor, Amaka." "Nothing more," Obi said, admiring his own reflection in the hallway mirror. "And every smart businessman knows when to cut a bad investment. I'm moving on. Vanessa is moving her things in tomorrow afternoon. She understands the corporate world. She looks like the wife of a CEO. You look like a maid." Amaka gasped, taking a step back as if he had physically slapped her. Vanessa, Obi's glamorous, ruthless vice president of marketing. Amaka had suspected it for months, but hearing him say it out loud shattered her heart into 1,000 tiny pieces. "You're giving her my home?" Amaka choked out. "It's my home," Obi corrected sharply, his eyes narrowing. "My name is on the lease. My name is on the company. You have nothing. Now zip up that pathetic bag and get out before I call the building security to drag you out." Amaka didn't say another word. The shock had frozen her tears. She zipped up her small suitcase, pulled the handle up, and walked past the man she had loved for 7 years. She walked out of the penthouse, the heavy oak doors clicking shut behind her. Obi walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows and looked out over the glittering skyline of downtown Atlanta. He took a deep breath, smiling widely. He felt absolutely invincible. Obi believed the world belonged to the ruthless. And to be truly ruthless, you had to quickly forget the people who fed you when you were starving. As he poured himself a glass of expensive bourbon, Obi's mind drifted back to how this all started. He was brilliant. He knew that. He was a genius coder. But 7 years ago, his genius was sitting in a rotting one-bedroom apartment with the electricity turned off. He had the idea for a revolutionary logistics software, but no bank would give him a loan. Then he met Amaka. She was sweet. She was trusting. She worked as a medical billing clerk during the day and waitressed at night. Obi saw an opportunity, and like a spider, he spun a web. He wooed her. He promised her the world. And as soon as she was totally in love with him, he asked for money. Amaka didn't just give him a little money. She gave him everything. She drained her entire life savings, $40,000, to pay for his servers, his legal fees, and his business licenses. But Obi was a master manipulator. When he filed the LLC paperwork for Ease Innovations 7 years ago, and he told Amaka that the lawyers made a mistake and left her name off the front page. He told her not to worry. He told her they were married, so what was his was hers. Amaka, foolish, trusting Amaka, believed him. As the company grew, Obi systematically shut her out. He moved the company funds into private offshore accounts. He gave himself the title of sole founder. He hired Vanessa, a beautiful, cunning woman who was more than willing to share Obi's bed and help him push his wife out of the picture. For the last 2 years, Obi had been siphoning millions of dollars out of the company, leaving Amaka on a strict, tiny grocery budget. He convinced her the company was struggling. He gaslit her every single day. And now, the final piece of his master plan was falling into place. Sterling Capital, a massive New York investment firm, I had offered to buy Easy Innovations for $50 million. The contract required the signature of the sole founder to release the software rights. Obi had the papers drawn up. He had the divorce papers ready for Amaka. He was going to take the $50 million, marry Vanessa, and leave his wife with absolutely nothing but the cheap clothes on her back. He finished his bourbon, set the glass down on the marble counter, and went to sleep. He slept like a baby. A man standing on a trapdoor always feels the tallest right before the lever is pulled. The next morning, the sun rose over Atlanta, shining brightly on the towering glass skyscrapers of the financial district. Obi woke up feeling like a king. Vanessa was already in the penthouse. She had let herself in with her new gold key. She was 28 years old, wearing a sleek, form-fitting white designer suit and diamond earrings. She handed Obi a cup of black coffee as he adjusted his $4,000 tailored suit in the mirror. "She's really gone?" Vanessa asked, a wicked, satisfied smile spreading across her lips. "I threw her out at midnight," Obi sneered, fixing his expensive silk tie. "She cried like a little girl, begged me to let her stay. It was actually pathetic to watch." Vanessa laughed, wrapping her arms around his shoulders from behind. "Good. She didn't belong in our world, Obi. Today we sign the papers. By noon, $50 million hits your private account. Then we fly to Paris." "Let's go get our money," Obi said. They took the private elevator down to the garage and climbed into Obi's rented black Porsche. He drove through the bustling streets of Atlanta, the engine roaring. And he looked at the pedestrians walking on the sidewalks. He looked down on them. He thought about Amaka, probably sitting at some cheap bus stop, crying over a cup of terrible coffee. The thought actually made him smile. He loved winning. He loved watching other people lose. They arrived at the massive 80-story glass tower where Sterling Capital had their regional headquarters. The valet rushed forward to open Obi's door. Obi tossed him the keys without even looking at his face. Obi and Vanessa walked into the marble lobby like royalty. The security guards immediately swiped their badges, ushering them into the VIP elevator. They rode up to the top floor in total silence. The anticipation was electric. Obi could practically smell the millions of dollars waiting for him. The elevator doors pinged open. A beautiful receptionist in a sharp black suit was waiting for them. "Mr. Ease, Ms. Vanessa," she said, offering a polite, professional smile. "Mr. Sterling is waiting for you in the main boardroom. Please follow me." The boardroom was built to intimidate weak men. But Obi was about to learn that true power doesn't need to shout to deafen a room. The massive oak double doors swung open. The room was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the entire city. In the center of the room sat a 30-foot-long table made of solid black marble. Sitting at the head of the table was Arthur Sterling. Mr. Sterling was 65 years old, with sharp, calculating gray eyes and a thick mane of silver hair. He wasn't just a venture capitalist. He was a tycoon, and a man who owned politicians and swallowed entire corporations before breakfast. He wore a simple dark blue suit, but the aura of absolute untouchable wealth radiated off him like heat from a furnace. Flanking Mr. Sterling were four highly paid corporate lawyers, their briefcases open, stacking thick stacks of legal documents onto the polished marble table. "Obie," Mr. Sterling said. His voice was deep, gravelly, and commanded instant respect. He didn't stand up to shake Obie's hand. He simply gestured to the two empty leather chairs opposite him. "Sit down. Let's get this done." Obie's chest puffed out with pride. He pulled out a chair for Vanessa, then sat down, unbuttoning his suit jacket with a slick, practiced motion. He looked at the thick stack of contracts. Right on top was a certified bank check. Obie's eyes locked onto it, and he could see the numbers printed clearly in thick black ink. $50 million. "It's a pleasure to finally close this chapter, Mr. Sterling," Obie said, his voice dripping with fake humility. "Easy Innovations has been my life's work. I built it from the ground up with my own bare hands. It's hard to let it go, but I know it's in the best possible hands with your firm." Vanessa placed her hand over Obie's on the table, smiling brightly at the billionaire. "He's a genius, Mr. Sterling. Nobody works harder than Obie." Mr. Sterling didn't smile back. He just stared at Obie for a long, uncomfortable moment. His sharp gray eyes seemed to strip away Obie's expensive suit, looking directly at the rotten soul underneath. "Yes," Mr. Sterling said slowly, leaning back in his heavy leather chair. "A genius. A self-made man. That is exactly what you told my acquisition team during the audits, wasn't it, Obie? You stated on the legal record that you are the sole creator, the sole funder, and the sole owner of the software architecture." "That is 100% correct, sir," Obie said confidently, picking up a gold pen from the table. "Just point to where you need my signature, and the code is yours." One of Mr. Sterling's lawyers, a severe-looking woman with tight glasses, cleared her throat. She slid a single, faded piece of yellow paper across the slick marble table. It stopped directly in front of Obie. "Then perhaps you can explain this, Mr. Ease," the lawyer said coldly. Obie looked down at the yellow paper. His blood instantly ran completely cold. His heart skipped a violent beat. It was the original, a hand-signed LLC incorporation document from 7 years ago. The document he had filed before he learned how to hire expensive corporate lawyers to hide his tracks. I don't understand," Obie stammered, a thin bead of sweat breaking out on his forehead. "This is just an old tax filing." "Look at line 4, Obie," Mr. Sterling commanded. The gravel in his voice was gone, replaced by a dangerous razor-sharp edge. Obie's eyes darted to line 4. His breath caught in his throat. Line 4, majority shareholder and chief financial funder. Name, Amaka Ease. Ownership. Stake, 51%. Obie's mind spun out of control. No, he had destroyed these copies. He had paid a shady accountant thousands of dollars 5 years ago to erase her name from the digital registry. How did the billionaire get the original hard copy? "Mr. Sterling, there is a misunderstanding," Obie said, his voice rising in panic. He forced a strained laugh. "That's my estranged wife. It was a clerical error from when we were kids. I bought her shares out years ago. She has no legal claim to this software. I am the sole founder." "Are you?" Mr. Sterling asked quietly. The billionaire steepled his fingers together. "Because my legal team doesn't rely on digital registries, Obie. We dig into the concrete. And what we found is that the $40,000 used to write the first line of code for this software came directly from a life insurance check cashed by Amaka Ease. Without her money, you don't exist." Vanessa shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Mr. Sterling, please. Obie has the divorce papers filed. She's nobody. We can just sign the deal and ignore her." "Mister, Sterling slowly turned his head and looked at Vanessa with such pure, terrifying disgust that she physically shrank back into her chair. "I don't do business with thieves," Mr. Sterling whispered dangerously. "And I certainly do not hand $50 million to a man who repays absolute loyalty with absolute betrayal. You see, Obi, I require the signature of the true majority owner to authorize this buyout. And unfortunately for you, my team tracked her down this morning." Obi felt the air leave the room. The trap door had just swung open beneath his feet. "Tracked her down," Obi choked out. "Where? Where is she?" Right on cue, the heavy oak doors of the boardroom clicked open. The heavy oak double doors of the massive boardroom swung open smoothly, but to Obi's, they sounded like the metallic clang of a prison cell slamming completely shut forever. He slowly turned his head to look. He expected to see his ex-wife standing there looking broken. He expected to see her crying, wearing the same cheap faded sweater and worn-out jeans she had on when he threw her out into the freezing Atlanta rain just 12 hours ago. He expected to see a desperate, pathetic woman. But the woman who walked into the room was absolutely breathtaking. Amaka Ease stepped onto the thick carpet, moving with a quiet, undeniable power. She wasn't crying. Her head was held high. Her dark brown skin glowed with health and purpose. She wasn't wearing a cheap sweater. She was wearing a stunning, perfectly tailored white designer suit that made Vanessa's clothes look like cheap knockoffs. Her thick, natural hair was pulled back into an elegant, sharp style. She wore no jewelry except for a simple, understated silver watch. Behind her walked a tall, incredibly sharp-looking corporate attorney holding a thick leather briefcase. Obi's jaw actually dropped open. He physically recoiled in his leather chair. "Amaka?" Obi whispered. His voice was so small, so weak, it barely carried across the massive marble table. Vanessa's eyes widened in sheer, unadulterated panic. She looked at Obi, then at Amaka, then at the $50 million bank check sitting right in front of them. The color completely drained from Vanessa's face. She instinctively reached out and grabbed Obi's arm. Amaka didn't even look at Vanessa. She didn't glare at her cheating husband. She walked straight past them both with the absolute confidence of a queen stepping into her own throne room. Mr. Sterling, and the ruthless billionaire who hadn't stood up to shake Obi's hand, immediately pushed his heavy leather chair back. He stood up to his full 6-foot height and offered Amaka a warm, respectful smile. He extended his hand. "Mrs. Ease," Mr. Sterling said, his deep voice carrying genuine warmth. "Thank you for coming on such short notice. Please have a seat." "Thank you, Mr. Sterling," Amaka replied smoothly, shaking his hand firmly. "It's a pleasure to finally meet the man buying my company." Obi felt like he had been struck by lightning. Her company? Amaka sat down directly across from Obi, sitting in a plush leather chair next to the billionaire. Her lawyer set his briefcase down and opened it right next to the stacks of legal documents. Obi's chest tightened violently. He couldn't breathe. He leaned forward, slamming both his hands flat onto the polished marble table. "What is this?" Obi demanded, his voice cracking with pure, humiliated rage. He pointed a shaking finger at his wife. "She has no business being here. This is my negotiation. I created Ease Innovations. I wrote the code. I spent 7 years building this empire. She is a nobody." Amaka slowly rested her hands on the table. She looked directly into the eyes of the man who had mentally abused her, gaslit her, and thrown her onto the street. There was no sadness left in her. There was only cold, terrifying clarity. "You wrote the code on a server that I bought," Amaka said quietly, her voice echoing perfectly in the silent room. "You filed the LLC with money that I earned waiting tables. For 7 years, you told me the company was failing. You told me we were broke. While you siphoned millions into offshore accounts with your mistress." Vanessa gasped, covering her mouth. Obi turned pale white. "You called me common," Amaka continued, leaning back slightly, never breaking eye contact. You said I didn't fit into the lifestyle of a millionaire. You threw me out at midnight because you thought I was an anchor holding you down. But Obi, you forgot the #1 rule of business. Amaka slid the faded yellow LLC document back across the table, tapping her manicured fingernail directly on the ink of line 4. Never steal from the majority shareholder, Amaka finished. This is insane, Obi yelled, jumping out of his chair. He turned desperately to the billionaire. Mr. Sterling, sir, you cannot listen to this crazy woman. We had a deal. $50 million. Just give me the pen. I'll sign the papers right now, and the software is yours. Mr. Sterling didn't blink. He looked at Obi with absolute, profound disgust. Sit down, boy, Mr. Sterling commanded. His voice wasn't loud, but it was so heavily loaded with power that Obi instantly collapsed back into his chair, his knees shaking. You are a very talented coder, Obi, Mr. Sterling said coldly, steepling his fingers. But you are an absolute fool. The digital registry you paid to alter 5 years ago was an illegal forgery. My legal team pulled the original hard copy charters from the state archives. Mrs. Ease owns 51% of your entire life's work. Without her signature, you cannot sell a single line of code. Without her signature, your company is totally worthless to me. Obi stared at the yellow paper. His vision blurred, and he felt a cold sweat pouring down his face. The massive penthouse, the expensive Porsche, the $50 million, it was all vanishing right in front of his eyes. He had to fix this. He had to manipulate her one last time. He had done it for 7 years. He could do it again. Obi took a deep breath, forcing a desperate, pathetic smile onto his face. He looked at Amaka, his eyes filled with fake, begging tears. Amaka, Obi whispered, softening his voice to the gentle, loving tone he used to use when they first met. Baby, please. I'm so sorry. I lost my way. The stress of the company, it messed with my head. I didn't mean any of the things I said last night. I was just exhausted. You're my wife. We built this together. Please, just sign the paper. We can split the $50 million. We can start over. Sit $25 million each. You'll never have to worry about money again. Vanessa stared at Obi in absolute shock. Obi, you're giving her half? She hissed, grabbing his arm again. Shut up! Obi snapped at his mistress, violently shaking her hand off his expensive suit. He turned completely back to his wife, begging like a pathetic, starving dog. Please, Amaka, sign it. For us. Amaka looked at him. She looked at the fake tears. She looked at the gold watch on his wrist, bought with the money he had stolen from her. She looked at Vanessa, the woman who had helped him destroy their marriage. For a single second, the entire room held its breath. Then, Amaka smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a woman who had finally taken back her crown. Mr. Sterling, Amaka said smoothly, turning to the billionaire. I am prepared to sign the buyout agreement and transfer 100% of the Ease Innovation software rights to Sterling Capital today. Obi let out a massive, shuddering breath of relief. Yes, he thought. She's weak. She still loves me. Excellent, Mr. Sterling said, sliding a sleek gold pen across the marble table toward her. The $50 million check is ready. However, Amaka continued, ignoring the pen, I have 2 conditions for my signature. Obi froze. Conditions? Amaka, don't play games. First, Amaka said firmly, looking directly at the billionaire's lead attorney. I want a full forensic audit of Ease Innovations from the last 5 years. Every offshore account, every hidden asset, every penny that Obi Eze illegally siphoned out of the company while acting as minority partner. The severe-looking lawyer nodded sharply. We have already begun the process, Mrs. Ease. Preliminary findings show he embezzled over $4 million of company funds. Amaka nodded. Good. Since he stole from the majority shareholder, I want him completely stripped of his remaining 49% equity as restitution for corporate fraud. The $50 million from the sale goes entirely into my name." Obi let out a strangled, high-pitched scream. "No, you can't do that. That's my money. It's my code." "It's corporate law," Mr. Sterling replied coldly, completely ignoring Obi's panic. "And what is your second condition, Mrs. Easy?" Amaka picked up the gold pen. She spun it slowly in her fingers. She looked dead into Obi's terrified, wide, sweating eyes. "My second condition," Amaka said softly, her voice carrying the heavy, brutal weight of absolute karma, "is that before I sign my name, Obi Eze is fired. I want him terminated from the company immediately. No severance, no stock options, no recommendation. I want him to walk out of this building with nothing but the suit on his back." Obi's heart stopped beating. The room started to spin. The walls were closing in on him. "Amaka, no!" Obi cried, slamming his hands on the table. He was actually sobbing now, ugly, desperate tears running down his face. "Please, I have debt. The penthouse, the cars, they're all leased under the company name. If you fire me, I lose everything. I'll be bankrupt by tomorrow morning. Please, Amaka, you can't do this to me." Vanessa abruptly stood up. Her chair scraped violently against the floor. She looked at Obi sobbing into his hands. She looked at the $50 million sliding away forever. She didn't love Obi. She loved his power. And his power had just been completely destroyed. "You are pathetic," Vanessa spat, glaring down at Obi. She grabbed her designer purse, turned on her heel, and marched out of the boardroom without looking back. Obi was completely alone, a ruined, broken man. Amaka didn't blink. She smoothly clicked the gold pen open. She reached across the polished marble table, pulled the thick stack of acquisition contracts toward her, and confidently signed her name on the dotted line. She saved his company, but she completely destroyed his life. "The deal is closed," Mr. Sterling announced, a dangerous smile crossing his face. He picked up the signed contract and handed the $50 million bank check directly to Amaka. Amaka stood up. She buttoned her tailored white jacket. She didn't look at Obi as he cried into the marble table. She simply picked up her briefcase, thanked the billionaire, and walked out the heavy oak doors, stepping into a brand new life of absolute wealth and power. If Obi had just been honest from the beginning, if he had just respected the woman who starved so he could eat, he would have walked out of that room with $25 million and a partner for life. He could have ruled the world, but he chose greed. He chose arrogance. And the universe always demands payment in full. If you want to see who Karma visits next, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Because in these stories, the proud always fall to the dirt, and the humble, they always end up owning the building.
Años exactamente, bueno, no exactamente, ¿no? Un grupo de soñadores en La Paz decidió fundar algo que trascendería generaciones. El glorioso Club Bolívar. No imaginaron que... Oye, me he esforzado al hacer el discurso. ¿Qué ponen ZZ, chat? Basta, me he esforzado, se los juro que me he esforzado, bro, basta. Por favor, me he esforzado en el discurso, respétenme un poquito, chat. Bueno, igual lo voy a leer, me la chupan, la verdad. Chat, nefastos. Son unos envidiosos, ¿saben? Son unos envidiosos. ¿En qué me quedé? No imaginaron que ese nombre se convertiría en un sinónimo de grandeza, lucha y de orgullo nacional. 101 años después, Bolívar no es solo un club, es un sentimiento que se hereda, que se sufre y se celebra. Últimamente sufrimos mucho por Robato, ¿no? Es el latido de miles de hinchas que en cada victoria y en cada caída nunca abandonan, ¿verdad? Nomás. Porque ser celeste no es una elección, es una forma de vivir. Muy bien, qué lindo, un aplauso. Bravo, bravo. Muchachos, tremendo discurso. Buenas noches, Edito, ¿cómo estás? Por lo menos ponte tu chompita, pues, un busito para leer el discurso. A ver, cállate, Gabo, ¿vos quieres ser baneado? Este discurso lo he hecho en mi cama, pensando en lo que es ser bolivarista, la verdad. Un aplauso, por favor, y con ayuda también del gran ChatGPT. Un aplauso para ChatGPT. ¿Cuál era la finalización de un ratito? Dice, que estos 101 años sean solo el comienzo de muchas más llenos de alegría. Felicidades, Academia. Felicidades, Bolívar. ¡Bravo! Aplausos para ChatGPT, muchachos. Para vos no, dice. Buenas noches, muchachos, ¿cómo están? Gracias por estar aquí, perdón por prender tan tarde. La verdad estaba viendo mi serie, estaba viendo el regreso de Justin Bieber. Toda la tarde me vi fútbol, hasta vi el partido del Tigre. Vi el partido de River, vi el partido de Oriente. Las declaraciones de Martins, tremendo lo de Martins, bebé, le tiró palo a Villegas, pero bien tirado. Huevada, en su cama lo hizo todo pajeado pensando en el... No, ¿qué dice este Arielito? Oye, ¿quiénes vamos, no? Mi sobrino de Kinder redacta mejor. Dile eso a ChatGPT, yo no he redactado. ¿Qué me estás molestando a mí? Felicidades. Qué pasado. Pues la verdad nomás. ¿Qué quieren que les diga? A ver, ¿qué les puedo decir, muchachos? Yo no publiqué nada en mi página, la verdad no hice nada estos días. Han sido momentos difíciles. Bien triste, ¿no? Mentira. Pero no, muchachos, bueno. Quiero felicitar a todos los que son bolivaristas y hoy en día más que nunca, ¿no? Que es difícil ser bolivarista en el sentido de todo el contexto que estamos pasando con el técnico. Pero si lo ven por el otro lado también hay que sentirnos orgullosos porque hemos llegado a estos 101 años. Creo que como la institución mejor parada, tanto económicamente, futbolísticamente y dirigencialmente diría, pero no, creo que no, ahí nos falta, ¿no? Ese eslabón para poder ser una institución sólida. Y como ayer creo que lo decía Dardo Gómez en su publicación en el Cholet, que Dios mío, ¿de dónde cagan tanta plata, bebés? Más fuegos pirotécnicos que en el aniversario de La Paz, no mames. Tremendo, felicidades a los del Cholet y a ver si pasan pues algunos monies. No mentira. Que dijo que el dirigente tiene que estar siempre al lado del hincha. Y eso es mucha verdad. Y no es por darle palo a Claure, porque él tendrá sus funciones, las cosas que tienen que hacer. Pero creo que por esa parte que estoy... Uy, ¿qué? No, todavía no va a arrancar la fiesta, Tucán, tranquilo. y por esa parte creo que está bien, ¿no? Está bien. Y bueno, se vienen unas futuras elecciones donde el principal candidato es Dardo Gómez a seguir manejando lo que es este club tan bonito que es Bolívar, ¿no? Por detrás, obviamente, yo creo que tiene que haber gente que lo asesore. Espera, ¿mi gatita se ha hecho pipí? No, ya, más bien. Me ha asustado, chicos, la verdad, me ha asustado. Ya saben ustedes, rayada está mi gatita últimamente, ¿no? No, ¿qué dice este Edipox? Y bueno, muchachos, nos espera, creo, un futuro grandioso. Yo lo dije, creo que esta es una oportunidad ya con el Stadium de una vez establecernos como un club de fútbol, pero serio, y fuera de ser autosostenible, que se proyecte a más, ¿me entiendes? No estancarnos en solo ser un club boliviano, sino ya empezar a soñar con, no sé, a ver, por ejemplo, la venta de butacas en el estadio, venta de marketing, merchandising, que se vaya ampliando más las sociedades, ¿me entienden? O sea, yo creo que si una cabeza maneja bien todo eso, creo que podemos despegar, ¿me entiendes? Y no estar ahí creando leyes de mierda con el gobierno, pidiendo perdón para que nos perdonen los impuestos, ¿no? Los gatos, ¿no? Entonces, creo que, o ser un club que está a punto de desaparecer, como Wilstermann, que desapareció de la liga, pero está a punto de desaparecer, pero absolutamente de todo el fútbol. O ser clubes que le están mangueando el auspicio a la UTV y chupándosela al presidente de la federación por subsistir. Entonces, creo que Bolívar es muy grande y tiene, creo que, trascender. Eso es lo que nos falta, trascender, dar ese pasito para trascender y lograr los objetivos que siempre hemos querido, ya sea una Copa Sudamericana o una Copa Libertadores, ¿no? Y siempre tiene que ir de la mano. Estos últimos años, creo que es la verdad, se han ido alejando a las generaciones bolivaristas, al hincha común, al hincha fanático, a todos los tipos de hinchas se han ido alejando del club, por justamente el mal trabajo que se ha ido realizando estos últimos años en Bolívar. ¿Qué decía Valdivia? Creo que dijo que dejó un club autosostenible. O sea, sí, no vamos a decir que no, ¿no? Económicamente creo que se dejó un club autosostenible. A ver, Solís, no pidas Gartic, ya les he dicho qué cosa de Gartic. Hoy día es aniversario del club, déjame hablar a ver de mi club, Solís. Igual en el grupo de WhatsApp, no Tucán, jugaremos Gartic. No quiero dibujar huevadas, déjame, no voy a jugar Gartic. Ya les he dicho, si quieren dibujar, agarren un cuadernito y empiezan a dibujar sus huevadas. No me vengan a molestar a mí con su Gartic. Saludos, Reyisita, ¿cómo estás? ¿Todo bien? Gartic, temática Bolívar. No, métanse su Gartic por el poto, ya les he dicho. Y bueno, muchachos, ¿en qué estaba? Es que me niego, muchachos, cada vez Gartic. Gartic, basta, no quiero jugar Gartic. Vayan a jugar Gartic con sus minas. Goklingo, huevadas hablas. Ya, espera, ¿qué habla este Ignacio Loza? Este Auri. Y bueno, muchachos, creo que sí, yo me quedo con eso. Este martes tenemos un partido muy importante en lo económico. Para mí, muy importante para ver qué está el club de cara a este año. Porque creo que es indispensable ganarle a ese equipo. En Copa Libertadores, obviamente por los 3 puntos y más, pero pensando a futuro, creo que es muy importante que se vea buen fútbol, ¿no? Y que la gente ya esté un poquito más tranquila con el funcionamiento del equipo. Ayer contra Bebé, bueno, el día sábado contra Bebé, se jugó un buen partido, no digo que un malo partido, creo que empezaron a aparecer personas, o bueno, jugadores que no estaban apareciendo, como es el Papu Velázquez, y muchos más, ¿no? Entonces, interesante. Y bueno, apareció Cauterucho, que en el partido de Libertadores no había aparecido ni de sombra. Parece que Cauterucho solo le mete goles a equipos como ABB. Y preocupa un poquito eso, ¿no? Hoy ganó el Tigre, está puntero con nosotros. Nacional Potosí también está compartiendo la punta con nosotros y muchos más que vienen bien entonándose en lo que es este torneo, ¿no? Que empezó retardísimo y creo que nos va a pesar no solo a nosotros, sino a los demás equipos que están participando en copas internacionales, ya sea Blooming el caso, ¿no? Y otros más. Mete gol equipo chicos como Dorniro, pero Dorni ni jugó. ¿Qué dicen, chicos? ¿Qué dicen? La era Robato es la peor de todos los tiempos, bebé, tomando en cuenta el centenario que es una vez en la vida. Sí, es la peor. De los últimos 10 años, ¿se podría decir que lo de Robato es lo peor que nos pudo pasar? A ver, piensen. Es que con lo que me dice el técnico de... A ver, ustedes pónganse a pensar, si tu técnico te dice que el objetivo era solo clasificar a Libertadores y que no estaba obligado a ser campeón, puta, ahí me la bajó mal, amigos, sinceramente, me la bajó mal. Podía aceptarle todas sus huevadas y todo, pero cuando dijo eso, es como que hizo sentir me hizo sentir un club más del montón, ¿me entiendes? Un Nacional Potosí, una Aurora, no sé, otros equipos bien X, así me hizo sentir, la verdad. Por eso yo vuelvo a repetir, yo voy a hablar de lo que veo en la cancha, y este martes, si es que Bolívar gana, se va a aplaudir, y si es que Bolívar pierde, bueno, también se va a criticar algunas cosas, y si han fallado en algunas cosas, igual vamos a criticarlas, vamos a observarlas y vamos a dar nuestro criterio. Pero fuera de eso, Robato no puede venir a